The wind screamed across the frozen land, carrying knives of snow that cut through skin and bone. The night was endless, black as death, and the stars above flickered like cold eyes watching from far away. On this wasteland, there was no warmth, no mercy, and no hope. Yet in the middle of that storm, an alien mother lay on the frozen ground, clutching two tiny lives against her chest. Her twin babies whimpered weakly, their cries almost lost to the roar of the storm. Her body trembled as the ice bit into her flesh. She wrapped her arms around the infants, trying to shield them with the last of her strength. The thin blanket covering them was already stiff with frost. She whispered softly into their ears, words they could not understand, but words she prayed would reach their hearts. "Hold on, my little ones, hold on for me." Her own people had left her here, abandoned. They had called her weak, a burden, someone not worth saving. She was of no use to them anymore, not with two newborns to feed in such a cruel winter. Her clan had turned their backs, leaving her to die in the snow with her children. She did not know how long she had lain there, minutes, hours, maybe days. Pain and exhaustion blurred together until all she could feel was the icy breath of death crawling closer. The babies grew quieter, their cries fading into silence. That silence was more terrifying than the storm. She shook them gently, whispering, begging them not to leave her. "Please don't close your eyes. Please don't sleep." Tears froze against her skin, tiny crystals of sorrow. She would give her life for them, but what good was her life when she had nothing left to give? Her chest burned with every breath, and her eyelids grew heavy. The snow was soft under her, too soft, almost welcoming. Part of her wanted to close her eyes and let the storm take her to end the suffering. But then she felt the faint heartbeat of the babies pressed against her chest. Their tiny warmth was fragile, fading, but still there. That heartbeat forced her eyes open again, and then a light. At first, she thought it was a dream. A small glow flickered in the distance, swaying back and forth through the blizzard. Her heart leapt in confusion. No one came out here. No one could survive in this endless white grave. Yet the light grew brighter, closer, cutting through the curtain of snow. She blinked, trying to clear her vision. A shape appeared behind the glow, a figure tall and broad, moving slowly but firmly against the storm. Her breath caught in her throat. Fear and hope fought inside her chest. Could it be one of her own kind, come back to finish what they had started? Or was it something worse? A wandering beast with a strange glow? She held her children tighter, shielding them with her body. The figure stopped a few steps away. The glow came from a lantern held high in one hand. The other hand was empty, open, showing no weapon. As the storm shifted, she finally saw him clearly. A human. Her heart pounded faster. She had heard of humans before. Some said they were savages, dangerous creatures who fought wars for no reason. Others said they were stubborn survivors, able to endure what no other race could. But she had never seen one with her own eyes. And now, here, in this frozen hell, one stood before her. The human lowered the lantern slowly. His face was pale from the cold, his eyes sharp but not cruel. Snow clung to his heavy coat, and his breath rose in clouds of white. For a long moment he simply looked at her, the alien mother half buried in snow, clutching two silent babies. She could not read his expression. Was it pity? Was it judgment? Or was it something darker? Her body screamed at her to beg for help, to cry out and plead for the lives of her children. But pride, pain, and fear locked her voice in her throat. She could only stare back, her arms tightening around the twins as if daring him to try and take them away. The human stepped closer. The snow crunched under his boots. He crouched down in front of her, his lantern casting warm light across her frozen skin. He reached out a gloved hand, not to strike, not to steal, but to brush the frost from the babies' faces. Their tiny eyes blinked weakly at the sudden glow. Something inside her broke. She had not seen a gentle touch in so long. She had not felt hope in even longer. Tears filled her eyes again, this time not from pain but from the smallest spark of belief that maybe they would not die tonight. But doubt still lingered. She knew nothing of him. She did not know why he was here or what he wanted. In this frozen wasteland, no one gave without reason. Every act of kindness carried a price. And yet, as the human lifted the babies into his arms and wrapped them in his thick coat, she did not resist. Her body was too weak, her heart too desperate. She let him help. She let him carry what she could no longer protect alone. The storm howled louder, but for the first time the cold did not feel like a final breath. For the first time, she thought there might be a tomorrow. Still, one thought echoed in her mind as she watched the human's eyes glow in the firelight of his lantern. Is he here to save us? Or is he the last face we will ever see? The cabin was small and lonely, standing half buried in snow on the edge of the wasteland. Its wooden walls creaked under the weight of ice, and smoke rose faintly from the chimney, curling away into the black sky. Inside, the glow of fire filled the darkness, pushing back the cold. The flames cracked and hissed as if fighting a war against the storm outside. The alien mother sat near the hearth, her babies pressed against her chest, their small bodies wrapped tightly in the human's thick coat. Their faces were no longer blue from frost, but their breaths were still shallow, fragile as candle flames in the wind. She held them close, her eyes never leaving the human who moved about the cabin. He worked in silence. His heavy boots thudded against the wooden floor as he set down supplies from a pack: dried food, a metal flask, strips of cloth, and small bundles of herbs. He placed logs on the fire with practiced hands, as though he had done this 1,000 times before. The flames grew stronger, licking higher, throwing sparks into the air. She watched him with a mix of fear and wonder. He had carried her through the storm, half dragging, half lifting her into this shelter when her legs had refused to move. His strength seemed endless, but now in the firelight she saw the exhaustion on his face. His skin was pale, his beard rough with frost, and his eyes, those human eyes, held a quiet storm of their own. He poured water into a small pot and set it above the fire. The bubbling steam soon filled the room, a soft warmth that made her bones ache with sudden relief. Then, from his pack, he drew a small wooden cup. He filled it with broth, the smell strange but rich, and held it out to her. She hesitated. No one had ever offered her food without asking something in return. Her own people had left her to die, yet here was a stranger, a human no less, giving freely. Her pride trembled. But the hunger in her chest and the weakness in her body made the choice for her. Slowly she reached out and took the cup. The liquid burned her tongue, yet it filled her with life. Warmth spread through her belly and her shaking slowed. The babies stirred at her chest, tiny mouths searching. The human noticed. He reached, again into his pack, and pulled out a flask, tilting it gently to her lips as she let drops fall into the mouths of her children. Their weak cries returned, thin but alive, and the sound brought tears to her eyes. Still, she did not speak. She did not know if he would understand her language, and even if he did, what could she say? Thank you? Why are you helping us? Or perhaps, the question burning deepest in her heart, what price will he demand later? The human said nothing either. He simply sat across the fire, resting his elbows on his knees, his gaze fixed on the flames. The silence between them was heavy, filled only by the crackle of burning wood and the soft breaths of the twins. At last he spoke. His voice was low, rough, but not unkind. You were going to die out there. She flinched at the sound of his words. She did not know them, but she understood the weight. His tone was not cruel, not mocking. It was truth, plain and sharp. She lowered her head, ashamed. He leaned back, eyes distant. I've seen it before, too many times. He did not look at her as he spoke, as if his words were meant more for the fire than for her. People left behind, families broken, cold taking them before the morning. Her eyes narrowed. The pain in his voice was real, like old scars hidden beneath his skin. She wondered what ghosts haunted him. Had he lost someone too? A mate? A child? She dared not ask, but the thought gnawed at her. The fire popped, sending sparks into the air. His eyes flickered, and for a moment she saw something, grief, heavy and raw. Before he turned away, she pulled her babies closer, her heart torn. She wanted to trust him, to believe that he was different from those who had abandoned her. Yet fear whispered in her ear. What if kindness was only a mask? What if tomorrow he demanded what she could never give? The human reached for more wood. As he did, the sound of the storm outside shifted. It was not just the wind now, distant, faint, almost hidden beneath the roar of the blizzard. There was another sound. A horn. Her blood turned to ice again. That sound was no storm. It was a call. A signal. Her people. The ones who had left her to die. The human froze too. His head lifted, his eyes narrowing as he listened. Slowly, he reached for a long, worn rifle leaning against the wall. He checked the weapon with steady hands, then looked at her. The firelight danced on his face, throwing shadows that made him look both savior and executioner. He spoke again, softer now, but his eyes burned with steel. "They're coming," her heart thundered. Her twins whimpered in her arms. The warmth of the fire suddenly felt thin, fragile as the cold world outside closed in again. And she wondered, with terror and hope tangled together, would this human truly protect them? Or had she just traded one death for another? The fire still glowed in the cabin, but its warmth felt fragile, like a candle in the mouth of a cave. The alien mother held her twins tighter, her ears straining against the wind. The horn sounded again, closer this time, carried by the storm. Her whole body stiffened. She knew that call. It belonged to the hunters, the same ones who had cast her out. They had not come to rescue her. No, they had returned for another reason, darker and crueler. The human rose slowly from where he had been sitting. He set the lantern on the table, his hand never leaving the rifle leaning against the wall. His face was calm, but his eyes sharpened like steel knives. He looked at her, not asking, not explaining, just searching her face as if to confirm what he already knew. She gave a small nod. Yes, they were coming. And yes, they were dangerous. The human tightened his jaw, his breath steady despite the danger pressing against the walls. He pulled on his heavy coat and strapped the rifle across his shoulder. From a shelf he took a small pack and filled it quickly. Food, cloth, fire starter. Then he bent down, kneeling before her. His hand stretched toward her arms. For a heartbeat she thought he would try to take her children. She pulled back in fear, clutching them to her chest, but he only adjusted the coat around the babies, tucking them in more securely against her. His eyes met hers for just a moment, and in them she saw no greed, no malice, only urgency. He whispered one word. A word she understood even though it was in his tongue. Run. The storm swallowed them whole as they stepped outside. The cold slapped her face like a cruel hand, stealing her breath, but there was no time to hesitate. The human led the way, his boots cutting deep tracks in the snow. She stumbled after him, clutching her babies close, her legs trembling with every step. Behind them, the horns cried again. Louder. The hunters were not far. The human moved with skill, weaving through the trees where the snow was less heavy, keeping low, keeping silent. He checked the sky, the ground, the shadows, as if he had spent his life surviving nights like this. He slowed when she fell behind, then urged her forward with a nod, never letting her fall too far. Her lungs burned. Her body screamed to stop, to rest, to collapse into the snow. But every time she faltered, she felt the tiny breaths of her children against her chest, and she forced her legs to move again. She could not stop, not now. Not with their lives bound to hers. The wind carried new sounds, shouts, the crunch of boots on ice, the clatter of weapons. The hunters were close, their voices filled with cruel laughter. They thought her dead already. They thought tonight would end in sport. The human suddenly pulled her to the ground. His hand pressed against her shoulder, firm but not harsh. He pointed ahead, where the faint glow of torches moved between the trees. Shadows of figures cut across the snow, hunting lines spreading wide. Her heart hammered in her chest. If they turned their heads, they would see her. If they came closer, there would be no escape. The human crouched low, studying the land around them. Then he motioned with his hand, left, deeper into the storm, away from the lights.
He helped her to her feet and guided her into a narrow gully, where the snow was deep enough to swallow sound.
They moved quickly, silently, the storm covering their tracks as fast as they made them. For a moment she thought they had escaped. The torches grew fainter. The voices drifted away. Hope sparked in her chest. But then a sudden howl split the night. Not a human cry, not a hunter's call, something worse. A beast. Released. The hunters had set loose their hounds, great wolf-like creatures, born for the snow, trained to kill. The human froze for half a second, then gritted his teeth and pulled her forward again. The chase was no longer just men. It was beasts with teeth sharp as knives and noses that could smell fear itself. Her babies whimpered, the sound so small yet so dangerous. She pressed them close, praying the storm would hide their cries. The human raised his rifle, his finger near the trigger, his eyes scanning the shadows. The first howl came from behind, the second from the right. The beasts were circling. She stumbled, her foot catching in the snow. The babies almost slipped from her arms, but the human caught her just in time, steadying her with a strength that pulled her back to her feet. His hand stayed at her arm for a moment longer than needed, firm, reassuring, before he pushed her forward again. Then, ahead of them, through the curtain of white, she saw it, a dark shape rising from the storm. A shelter. Not a cabin this time, but a jagged wall of stone half buried in snow. A cave. The human's eyes caught the same sight. He gave a sharp nod and motioned her forward, faster now, as if all his hope was pinned on that black mouth in the cliff. But the beasts were closer. Their growls rolled through the storm, heavy and hungry. She could almost see their glowing eyes in the dark, almost feel their breath at her back. Her legs screamed with pain. Her lungs burned like fire. But she kept running. For her babies. For herself. For the slim chance of survival that the cave offered. The human stayed at her side, rifle raised, every step measured, every breath steady. He would not let them fall. Not yet. The cave was only a few steps away when the first beast leapt from the shadows. Its teeth flashed white, its growl split the air, and its claws cut through the snow as it sprang toward her. She screamed and the human fired. The sound of the shot thundered through the storm, echoing into the night. The beast fell, but more shadows moved behind it. Many more. The chase was not over. It had only just begun. The cave swallowed them in darkness, its mouth wide like the jaws of some ancient beast. Inside, the storm's roar became muffled, like the world outside had been shut away. The human guided her carefully, his lantern light chasing away the shadows. The alien mother clutched her twins close, their small breaths warming her chest. Her legs shook, her lungs still burning from the run, but she forced herself deeper into the cave. The floor was uneven, sharp rocks hidden under snow and ice. Water dripped from above, each drop echoing like a clock counting down. The twins whimpered, their cries bouncing off the stone walls, too loud, too dangerous. She tried to hush them, rocking gently, but fear gripped her heart. If the beasts followed, those cries would lead them straight here. The human seemed to know this too. He placed a finger to his lips, his eyes sharp and commanding. She nodded quickly, her throat tight as she pressed the babies closer, praying for silence. Deeper in, the cave widened into a hollow chamber. Old fire marks stained the stone, black circles where someone long ago had once sought shelter. The human knelt, pulling flint and tinder from his pack. Sparks flew, and soon a small flame grew, weak at first, then stronger, licking at dry wood he had carried. The firelight stretched across the walls, revealing jagged stone and ice. And for the first time since the chase began, there was warmth. She sank down beside the fire, her whole body trembling with exhaustion. The twins stirred, their tiny hands moving against her skin. She kissed their foreheads, whispering soft words in her tongue, words of comfort that barely reached her own heart. The human sat across from her, the rifle resting at his side. His face was half shadow, half fire, his eyes always on the cave mouth. He listened, every muscle tense as if expecting claws to scrape against the stone at any moment. For a long time, neither of them spoke. Only the crackle of fire and the soft breathing of the children filled the air. Finally, the human broke the silence. "You shouldn't be alive," he said quietly, his voice rough, not cruel, but heavy with truth. "They left you to die out there." Her eyes narrowed. She understood only fragments of his words, but the meaning was clear. She looked down at her babies, then back at him, anger and sorrow mixing inside her. "Yes," she whispered in her own tongue, though she knew he would not understand. "They left us. The human leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. His gaze was far away, lost in the fire. "I know what that feels like," he muttered. His voice carried a weight that needed no translation. Something in his eyes caught her attention. Pain. Old, deep pain. She could see it in the lines of his face, in the way his jaw clenched when he spoke. She wondered what ghosts haunted him. Who had he lost to the cold, to war, to betrayal? She wanted to ask, but the words would not come. Instead, she studied him in silence. His coat was torn at the shoulder where claws had raked him during the escape. Blood stained the fabric, dark and heavy. Her heart skipped. He was hurt. She reached out slowly, hesitantly, and touched his sleeve. He looked at her in surprise, but she pointed to the wound. Without a word, she tore a strip of cloth from her blanket and pressed it against his arm. He winced, but he did not push her away. Their eyes met again, alien and human, and for a moment the fire between them felt stronger than the one on the ground. But the silence of the cave was broken. A low growl echoed from the entrance, deep and rumbling. The human stiffened. He grabbed his rifle, his body ready. She pulled her babies close, her heart pounding in terror. Shadows moved against the cave wall as more growls joined the first. The beasts had found them. The human raised the rifle, aiming at the black mouth of the cave. His breath slowed, his eyes sharp as stone. She could see it now, the soldier in him, the survivor. He had faced death before many times, and he would face it again tonight. The growls grew louder, claws scraping stone, heavy bodies moving closer. The firelight trembled, making the shadows dance. The twins began to cry, their voices shrill in the hollow chamber. She tried to hush them, but fear had stolen her voice. The human looked back at her just for a heartbeat. His eyes locked with hers, calm but fierce. He gave a small nod, as if to say, "I will not let them touch you." And then the first beast appeared, its eyes glowing in the firelight, its fangs bared, saliva dripping from its jaws. Behind it, more shadows shifted, filling the mouth of the cave. The human's finger tightened on the trigger. The rifle cracked, thunder filling the cave, smoke mixing with firelight. The beast fell, but another leapt forward, snarling. The alien mother clutched her twins tighter, her whole body trembling. The cave was no longer a shelter. It had become a battlefield. The firelight flickered wildly as the human stood his ground, the rifle roaring again and again, each shot echoing into the storm outside. The beasts howled, the shadows danced, and death clawed at the very walls around them. And as the fight began, one thought consumed her heart. Would this cave save them, or become their tomb? The cave thundered with the sound of gunfire. Smoke filled the air, stinging the alien mother's eyes as she clutched her twins against her chest. Each shot from the human's rifle echoed like a hammer, shaking her to the core. The first beast fell, blood splattering across the icy stone, but more came, their growls shaking the cave walls. The human stood like a wall of iron, feet planted firm, rifle braced against his shoulder. His face was calm but fierce, firelight burning in his eyes. He shot again, and another beast dropped, its body twisting in agony before going still. Yet for every one that fell, two more emerged from the darkness. Their yellow eyes glowed, their teeth gleamed, their claws scraped sparks against the stone. The alien mother pressed herself into the corner of the cave, her heart racing. The twins wailed in her arms, their cries echoing, pulling the monsters closer. She tried to hush them, whispering soothing words, but fear trembled in her voice. The sound of her children felt like a beacon in the dark. The human lowered the rifle for a moment and swung a hatchet from his belt. One beast lunged at him, jaws wide, but he met it with steel. The hatchet struck deep, cutting through fur and bone. The beast yelped, then collapsed. Another came at his back, but he turned fast, the rifle swinging like a club cracking against its skull. The creature staggered but did not fall. Blood ran down his coat from the wound in his shoulder, yet he did not falter. Every movement was sharp, controlled, born of someone who had fought for survival many times before. He fought not only for himself but for her, for the twins, for lives that were not even his own. For the first time, the alien mother felt strength stir in her own heart. She could not sit idle while this stranger fought alone. She laid the babies gently on the ground behind her, covering them with her cloak. Then with trembling hands, she grabbed a loose rock from the cave floor. When the next beast lunged past the fire toward the human, she swung with all her might. The rock cracked against the creature's skull, making it stumble. It turned toward her with a snarl, eyes blazing with rage. Terror froze her for a heartbeat. But then the rifle barked again and the beast collapsed at her feet, its lifeless eyes staring. The human gave her a quick look, half surprise, half respect. She met his eyes, breathless, heart racing. For a moment they understood each other. She was not useless. She would fight too, but the battle was not done. Shadows still moved at the mouth of the cave. The hunters had come. Their torches burned like fire snakes, glowing through the storm as they approached. Voices carried through the night, cruel laughter echoing. The beasts had only been the first wave. Now came the ones who had left her to die. The human's jaw tightened. He dropped to one knee, reloading the rifle with swift, practiced hands. The alien mother pressed her babies close again, her body shielding them as light and shadows danced on the stone. The hunters entered with no mercy. Their eyes shone with cruelty, their weapons sharp and gleaming. One stepped forward, his smile twisted. He barked something in her language, words that made her blood run cold. "You should have died out there." The human didn't understand, but he saw her fear. That was enough. He raised the rifle and fired. The hunter fell, his body crumpling like cloth. The cave exploded into chaos. Torches dropped, swords clashed, gunfire roared. The human moved like a storm, his rifle cracking, his hatchet swinging. Every strike fueled by iron will. Blood sprayed across the stone walls, painting the cave in red. But he was only one man. A hunter's blade slashed across his side, drawing a cry of pain. He staggered, knees buckling, but his eyes stayed sharp. He refused to fall. The alien mother screamed as another hunter lunged toward her, his blade raised high. Desperation flooded her. She grabbed the fallen beast's claw, broken and sharp, and drove it into the hunter's chest. His eyes went wide, shock etched across his face before he collapsed to the floor. Her hands shook, blood soaking her fingers, but she had done it. She had killed to protect her children. The human glanced back at her, his lips curling into something almost like a smile, even as blood dripped down his coat. The fight dragged on, every heartbeat an eternity. Finally, at last, silence fell. The last hunter lay still, his body sprawled in the firelight. The beasts were dead, their forms strewn across the stone floor. The smell of smoke, blood, and death filled the cave. The human leaned heavily against the wall, his rifle slipping from his hand. His chest rose and fell in ragged breaths. Blood stained his coat, soaking through to the ground. The alien mother rushed to him, panic tightening her throat. She pressed her hands against his wounds, trying to stop the bleeding, whispering desperate prayers. He met her eyes, his voice low, barely more than a breath. "You're safe. They're safe." Her heart twisted. He had saved them again, but at what cost? His skin was pale, his body weak, and she feared he would not live to see the morning. The twins cried softly behind her, alive, untouched. She held his hand tightly, her tears falling onto his bloodied coat. The fire burned low, shadows flickering on the cave walls. For a moment there was no storm, no hunters, no beasts, only the question that tore her heart apart. Would he survive the night, or had he given everything to keep them alive? The cave was quiet now, but not peaceful. The fire had burned low, its light flickering weakly against blood-stained stone. The bodies of beasts and hunters lay scattered, their shadows twisting in the dim glow. The storm still howled outside, but here inside, only the sound of shallow breaths filled the air. The human lay against the wall, his coat soaked red. His chest rose and fell, heavy and uneven, each breath a struggle. His face was pale, his lips pressed tight as if holding back groans of pain. The alien mother knelt beside him, her hands trembling as she pressed cloth against his wounds. Her twins lay behind her, wrapped in her cloak, their small bodies finally resting in uneasy sleep. She whispered to him in her tongue, though she knew he could not understand. Words of pleading, words of thanks. Words meant more for herself than for him. "Don't leave. Please don't leave us." His eyes flickered open, just barely. He looked at her, and for a moment he almost smiled. His hand, shaking, lifted from the ground and brushed against hers. Not with strength, but with something softer. Trust. She held his hand tightly, afraid that if she let go, he would slip away forever. The fire sputtered, and she realized it was dying. Panic gripped her. Without fire, the cold would kill them all before morning. She looked at her babies, then back at the human, then forced herself to stand. Her body ached, her legs weak, but she gathered wood from the far corner of the cave. She fed the flames until they grew again, pushing back the dark. When she returned to him, his eyes were half closed. She tore more cloth from her blanket and bound his wounds, pressing tight, though every flinch from him stabbed at her heart. She worked with care, her fingers stained with his blood, her breath shallow with fear. At last she leaned close, listening to his chest. His heart still beat, weak but steady. Relief washed through her, but dread followed. If infection set in, if the bleeding didn't stop, the morning would not matter. The hours crawled. She stayed at his side, holding his hand, speaking softly even though she knew he could not understand. She told him of her people who had abandoned her, of the cruel choice that had left her in the snow. She told him of her twins, their names whispered like fragile secrets. And as she spoke, she realized something. She had never shared these words with anyone before. At times, she thought he was gone. His breaths grew shallow, his face still. Her chest clenched with terror, and she shook him gently, begging him not to leave. Then his eyes would flicker open again, faint but alive, and her tears would fall anew. The babies stirred often, their cries small but piercing in the hollow cave. Each time she rocked them gently, her body a shield between them and the cold. But her gaze always returned to him, to the man who had saved them again and again. Why had he done it? Why risk his life for her and her children? She could not understand. Her own people had seen her as a burden, yet he, a stranger, an alien, someone with no reason to care, had stood against beasts and hunters for them. The firelight revealed the truth in his face. Pain, grief, a wound not only in his flesh but in his soul. She remembered the way he had spoken earlier, voice heavy with sorrow as if haunted by ghosts. Perhaps, she thought, he too had lost someone once. Perhaps in saving her children, he was also saving a part of himself. Dawn crept slowly, a faint light seeping into the cave mouth. The storm outside had calmed, leaving behind a silence heavy with snow. The alien mother felt her eyes grow heavy, her body weak, but she would not sleep. She sat beside him, watching every breath, clutching his hand as if her will alone could keep him alive. At last, when she thought she could bear no more, his hand squeezed hers weakly. She gasped, looking down, and saw his eyes open wider than before. His lips moved, his voice a rasp but clear. "Still here," he whispered. Her throat tightened, tears filling her eyes. She nodded quickly, whispering back, though he could not know her words. "Yes, still here. You're still here." Her twins stirred, letting out soft cries, but this time they sounded different. Not cries of hunger or pain, cries of life. Stronger, louder. They reached small hands into the air as if greeting the new day. For the first time since the night of ice, hope stirred in her heart. Maybe they had survived the worst. Maybe tomorrow was possible. But far beyond the cave, beyond the storm and the snow, others had already begun to notice. The hunters had not returned, and whispers spread among her people. Rumors of survival, rumors of a human standing against death itself. Powerful eyes would turn toward this cave soon, and their judgment would be harsh. The alien mother did not know what tomorrow would bring, but she knew one thing for certain. The man who had saved her children, the man lying broken yet alive beside her, she would not let him be left behind. The fire crackled, the twins cried softly, and dawn rose over the snow. The night had not claimed them. Against all odds, they had lived to see another day, but the real test had only just begun. The storm had passed. Snow lay deep across the land, untouched, glowing silver under the pale morning sun. From the cave, the alien mother stepped out, her twins bundled against her chest. Her body was weak, but her eyes held a new fire. Behind her, the human leaned heavily against the cave wall, wounded but alive, his breath rough but steady. They had survived the night, but peace did not last. By midday, the sound of engines cut through the stillness. The mother froze, her heart tightening. Across the snowy horizon, shadows grew, ships, sleek and dark, settling onto the ice. Her people, the same ones who had abandoned her to die, the same ones who had sent hunters to finish her. Now they had returned, not with pity but with judgment. The ships landed in a circle, and from them stepped elders and soldiers, their armor gleaming in the cold light. Their faces were stern, their eyes sharp. The elders carried staffs marked with symbols of power, and the soldiers carried weapons ready for war. The alien mother held her twins tighter, her breath quick and shallow. Fear gripped her heart, but so did anger. They had left her. They had tried to erase her and her children. Yet here she stood, alive, with her babies breathing strong against her chest. The human stepped from the cave behind her, leaning on his rifle for support. His body was battered, his coat torn, blood still fresh on his side. Yet he stood tall, his eyes steady, unafraid. The soldiers turned their weapons toward him instantly, their fingers ready. To them, he was nothing but a threat, an outsider, a human who had dared to interfere. The lead elder stepped forward, his voice sharp and cold. He spoke in their tongue, words the human could not understand, but the mother knew too well. You should not be alive. You were meant to pass into the snow, and yet here you are with this creature. She trembled, but her voice rose, steady despite her fear. You left me. You left my children. And he, she pointed toward the human, saved us. He fought your hunters. He fought your beasts. Without him, we would all be dead. The elders murmured among themselves, their faces twisting with shock and disbelief. One of them spat on the snow. A human? Their kind is nothing but filth. Why would one of them protect you? Her voice grew stronger, her anger breaking free. Because he has more honor than all of you. You called me weak. You called my children a burden. But he, a stranger, chose to fight for us. He bled for us. He gave what none of you would. The soldiers shifted uneasily, their eyes flicking between the mother, the twins, and the human who stood silently at her side. The eldest of the elders slammed his staff against the ice, his voice booming. This cannot be allowed. He must die. A human saving one of ours is a shame. It will bring dishonor. The law is clear. The human's jaw tightened. He raised his rifle slightly, his breath ragged but his will unbroken. He understood nothing of their words, but he understood their eyes. He knew death when he saw it. And he was ready to face it. The alien mother stepped in front of him, clutching her twins to her chest. Her eyes burned as she glared at the elders. If you kill him, you will kill me too. You will kill us all, because I will not leave him. He is part of us now. Gasps rippled through the crowd. The elders exchanged looks, anger and fear flashing across their faces. This had never happened before. No one had ever stood for an outsider, much less a human. The silence stretched, heavy and sharp. Then one of the younger soldiers lowered his weapon. His eyes softened as he looked at the human. He bled for her, for children not his own. Perhaps the shame is not his, but ours. Murmurs spread quickly. The elders tried to silence them, but the words had taken root. The soldiers had seen enough blood spilled in the snow. They knew truth when it stood before them. The lead elder raised his staff again, fury twisting his face. But before he could speak, the twins cried out, their voices small but strong, echoing across the ice. All eyes turned to them. Two lives that had been meant to perish, now alive because of the man their leaders called an enemy. The alien mother lifted her chin. Her voice shook, but it carried across the silence. You abandoned us. He saved us. And now I choose. My children will not grow under your law. They will grow with truth, with honor, with him. The human glanced at her, his brows furrowing in confusion, but he understood the tone, the fire in her words. He saw the way she stood before her people, defiant, fearless, and he knew she was choosing him. The elders trembled with rage, but they could not stop the tide. The soldiers lowered their weapons one by one. The murmurs grew into voices, the voices into shouts. Not all agreed, but the silence of obedience was broken. The storm had passed, but something greater had begun. The alien mother stood in the snow, her twins in her arms, the human at her side. Together they faced the elders, the soldiers, and the cold eyes of a people who had cast her out. This was no longer just about survival. It was the beginning of change. And as the wind whispered across the frozen land, one truth settled in the hearts of all who witnessed it. In the darkest night, when even her own people abandoned her, it was humanity's fire that had kept them alive. The galaxy would never forget it.